Sometimes we fall into the belief that Hakuin, through the fierceness of his words, was somebody who was advocating and glorifying harsh austerity. Discipline must be fierce, but balanced. So Hakuin criticizes even his own early years of his practice as too harsh, driven by youthful pride and the desire to be a great monk, a great Zen practitioner, performative practice. He practiced Zazen with such intensity that he drove himself into collapse. But what he advocated for is steady effort. Please feel free to turn. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is also the afternoon of our long Rohatsu Day. And as it goes sometimes during the day, we enter a phase of slump. Where am I? What am I doing here? Isn't it time yet to go to bed? No, not quite yet. All right. I thought I was over the hump. And the only thing with going over the hump, once you're over the hump, it only goes downhill. So we have a wonderful occasion to remind us about how to practice. And not only how to practice, but also the occasion of commemorating the closest and most important ancestor of this lineage in which we are practicing here. The closest reformer and most influential shaper of the forms and of the way that modern Rinzai Zen is practiced around the world and here. And so today I want to really closely examine what that actually means and how it plays into what and how we are doing things. So of course I'm speaking about Runta Hakuin Ekaku Zenji. I believe that his name bestowed by the emperor is Shoin Kokushi, which is the last bestowal of the name, of the title of Kokushi on anyone in this history. The great national teacher, Shoin. So he was very, very important. And we will look a little bit at his life, which you probably have heard in the previous talks, which I had to miss, but there will be some important points to touch upon. So generally, Hakuin's life is classified in 4 different periods. The first one is, of course, early life, and this early life, which lasted from his birth in 1686 until about 1702, was very much illuminated and informed by spiritual anxiety. So we know that he was born in the Hara village at the bottom of Mount Fuji. I mean, who here was born at the bottom of a fire-spitting mountain? Anyone? Well, let's be generous. All of us. All of us. Just you wait long enough. So, and as a boy, his mother took him one day to a Nichiren temple. And you know, Nichiren is a very distinct flavor of Japanese Buddhism. Nichiren practiced actually in his temple when the entire town suddenly was on fire, and just sitting there and chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Hail to the Lotus Sutra. His temple was the only place that was spared by the fire. And from that came then this rise of Nichiren Buddhism that is very, very clear in what it is teaching. That's all I say about it. I will not do what Nichiren does, which would be disparage any other way to the top of that fiery mountain. So, but listening to these preachers, they really had their stick down. They could terrify grown-ups, they could terrify young people, and they terrified young Hakuin. So much that he was so afraid of having to face hell, because surely there is no other way for a rotten human being like he thought he was than to end up in this terrible place. And I believe that Nichiren priest actually spoke about the cold hells, but it was so terrifying that all the hells came into Hakuin's mind all the time. And the story about him being in the bath, and his mother liked the water very hot, and he went in there and he thought that he's already in hell, or seeing it as a preview, thinking to himself, oh, I can't even face this hot water. How will I do when it's time for me to go to hell? So this urgency for liberation was instilled in him. And age 15, he renounced his home, his family life, and became a monk at Shōinji. He practiced, and of course, the early training that he received there left him unsatisfied. He saw that this kind of monastic Buddhism that he encountered there was lax, and he called it spiritually dead. It is, there might be some element in there of Bankei, the unborn. We are all Buddhas to begin with, and so that led some people to think that, oh yeah, I'm Buddha already, so what's there to do? Oh yeah, hallelujah. So the outcome of this first phase of his life was the life-setting and life-pervading vow to find true Zen beyond the enactment of ritual and also ritualistic kind of zazen. He threw himself into this. And the second phase of his life was intense training. Intense training and the development of this great doubt. And it led to his manifestation of the Zen sickness. So this lasted about from 1702 until 1716. He trained under several teachers. But the one who was the most influential was the fierce master Dokyo Etan Zenji. You know Dokyo Etan from the lineage chant that we have. He's also called Shoju Rojin or Shoju Rokan. And, well, here's another nice thing to know about this teacher. He practiced at Shojuan, the Shoju hermitage in Iyama in Japan. Very, very unassuming place. So unassuming that not much time after Hakuin's times, this Shojuan fell in terrible disrepair. And there was no real appreciation for Dokyo Etan, who had lived there. And so one of the people who was really interested in restoring Shojuan was Yamamoto Genpo Roshi. Yamamoto Genpo Roshi helped with the restoration of Shojuan. And as you know, Yamamoto Genpo Roshi is the direct predecessor to Soen Roshi. So his Dharma transmitting master. So there is an affinity here. And the Zen master I was ordained by Sasaki Joshu Roshi before he came to the United States. He was the abbot at Shojuan in Iyama before he came here. Right from there to America. So that's a very nice and great grandfatherly connection that our lineages here have. So this Shoju Rojin was very uncompromising. Yeah. Uncompromising in a way that we can't even imagine. So let me tell you what Hakuin has to say about his teacher, Shoju Rokan. He said, take someone like my own teacher, Shoju Rokan. There was once a woodcutter living near Shoju's hermitage in Narasawa who came upon a wolf cub while he was working out in the mountains. He carried the cub home with him and fed it, and soon he became deeply attached to the little animal. He set out into the forest one day, followed by the now devoted young wolf, to cut down large trees. The wolf lay down nearby and waited as the woodcutter set about his task. By a freak accident, the tree toppled and turned suddenly in an unexpected direction. The woodcutter looked on helplessly as the main trunk of the tree landed directly on top of the wolf, crushing him. Overwhelmed with grief and remorse, the woodcutter could do nothing but sadly dispose of the lifeless remains and returned home. Beginning that very night, wolves from all corners of the province began gathering around Iyama. They ran wildly across the countryside in packs, large and small, their eyes glowing fiercely with anger and resentment. Each night they descended into the village. The streets were alive with wolves. They stole into houses and dragged children, 4, 5, 6, even 7 years old, outside, where the pack would set upon them and tear them into pieces. The next morning, Remnants of the bodies would be strewn about the streets. Their wolfish vengeance knew no bounds. At first sign of darkness, the villagers would shut themselves inside their homes and bar their doors and windows fast. Not a soul dared to venture outside. All movement in the village ceased. Witnessing these events, Shoju recalled the life of no self, of self-negation, and the great teacher Shuho Myocho. The life he had led on the riverbanks near the Shijo Bridge in Kyoto. A good chance, he said to himself, to test the strength of my religious mettle. He went to the village cemetery where the wolves congregated. They congregated in great numbers. He fashioned a seat of grasses and sat down upon it to meditate. He vowed to continue sitting for the next 7 nights. When darkness fell, wolves in numbers beyond count gathered, and the cemetery where Shoju sat, their dark shapes padding around him on all sides. Suddenly, 2 or 3 swerved away from the pack and darted straight for him, hurtling over his head only at the last instant. Wolves began sniffing at his throat, butting and poking at his back. He could feel their warm snouts brazenly nuzzling up and down his legs, around the soles of his feet. Icy fear gripped his liver. His knees quaked like jelly as the beasts probed and tested in 1,000 different ways. Shoju never once flinched or wavered through it all. He even sensed a secret joy upon feeling the courage and strength stir within him. He sat unharmed right through until the end of the 7th and final night. I heard this story from Shoju himself one evening when we were drinking tea together. Well, it might not have been tea that they were drinking, but what we encounter here is the fierce determination that is being expressed here in the modernized version of the story of Siddhartha sitting under the tree, of us sitting in the zendo. Have you felt the warm or cold snouts of the wolves going up and down your leg? Or have you just maybe sat there and heard from somewhere where you can't see? Certainly. So this is Shoju Rojin, a teetotaler. So the hallmark of his qualities that this teacher demanded were great doubt, great faith, and great determination. Great doubt, great faith, great determination. That comes up a lot of times. And we always get questions, what is great doubt? What is great determination? And so the best thing to say here is to look at what Hakuin himself had to say. In this portion of his writings, he begins by posing the following question. What is that, now in quotes, true wind, end quote, that has never once fallen to earth over the span of endless kalpas? It is the one great matter of human life, striving with fierce and courageous determination to bore through the barrier into seeing one's self-nature. A person of old has said that The practice of Zen requires 3 essentials: a great root of faith, a feeling of great doubt, and great burning aspiration. Lack any one of these, and you are like a 3-legged cauldron with 1 leg broken off. The most important of the 3 is the great burning aspiration. You may possess an abundance of deep-rooted faith and a great doubt as well, but if the burning aspiration is not present, the great and marvelous power for healing others will not develop, and you will be incapable of curing the besetting illnesses of mankind and liberating sentient beings. What are those illnesses? Ignorance, the afflicting passions, birth and death, the very roots of karma. So, what is a great burning aspiration? The intense arousing of the mind in fearless determination to move forward to deliverance. So it is said, attainment of Buddhahood comes in 1 instant of thought for sentient beings who are fearless and intrepid. For those who are indolent and slothful, the passage to nirvana can take 3 long kalpas. Who are the indolent and slothful? The great and powerful enemy of all pilgrims who aspire to perfect themselves in the practice of the 3 vehicles. In short, it refers to the sleep demon of silent illumination. It was for reasons such as these that the Buddha himself long ago engaged in a considerable amount of meddling and interference. When his disciple, Aniruddha, was constantly succumbing to the sleep demon, the Buddha admonished him. Oysters and clams and other shellfish doze off into naps of 1,000 years, thereby losing the opportunity to encounter a Buddha when he appears in the world. Aniruddha thereupon kindled a great burning aspiration. He practiced diligently for 7 days and 7 nights without lying down for sleep or repose. And all of a sudden, the great eye of wisdom blazed forth from within. Clam Zazen. Well, oyster zazen are also like that. But maybe at least you have even that is okay as long as there's a little piece of sand in there around which eventually a pearl forms. But even to get the pearl out, the shell has to open. The shell has to open. So this is what Hakuin had to say about it. So he developed these really important 3 pillars of Zen, 3 legs of the cauldron. He had a major Kensho experience, another one, and so on, and he pushed himself even harder. And this phase ends in the very famous episode of his Zen sickness. A near fatal breakdown from overexertion. So, what did he have to say about that? He said about himself, "On the day I first committed myself to a life of Zen practice, I pledged to summon all the faith and courage at my command and dedicate myself with steadfast resolve to the pursuit of the Buddha's way. I embarked on a regimen of rigorous austerities, which I continued for several years, pushing myself relentlessly. Then one night, everything suddenly fell away, and I crossed the threshold into awakening. All the doubts and uncertainties that had burdened me all those years suddenly vanished, roots and all, just like melted ice. Deep-rooted karma that had bound me up for endless kalpas to the cycle of birth and death vanished like foam on the water. It's true, I thought to myself, the way is not far from humans. Those stories about the ancient masters taking 20 or even 30 years to attain it, someone must have made them all up. For the next several months, I was waltzing on air, flagging my arms and stamping my feet in a kind of witless rapture. Afterward, however, as I began reflecting upon my everyday behavior, I could see that the two aspects of my life, the active and the meditative, were totally out of balance. No matter what I was doing, I never felt free or completely at ease. I realized I would have to rekindle a fearless resolve and once again throw myself, my life and limb together into the Dharma struggle. With my teeth clenched tightly and eyes focused straight ahead, I began devoting myself single-mindedly to my practice, forsaking food and sleep altogether. I don't know if you have, but I have encountered in my life awakened beings who turned out to be awakened jerks. That pushed in the same way through this and had that wonderful experience without ever noticing that the two aspects of their life, the active and the meditative, were in complete opposite directions. So Hakuin goes on. Before the month was out, my heart fire began to rise upward against the natural course, parching my lungs of their essential fluids. My feet and legs were always ice cold. They felt as though they were immersed in tubs of snow. There was a constant buzzing in my ears, as if I were walking beside a raging mountain stream. I became abnormally weak and timid, shrinking and fearful in whatever I did. I felt totally drained, physically and mentally exhausted. Strange visions appeared to me during waking and sleeping hours alike. My armpits were always wet with perspiration. My eyes watered constantly. I traveled far and wide, visiting wise Zen teachers, seeking out noted physicians. But none of the remedies they offered brought me any relief. Here Hakuin, experiencing another great disappointment. The first disappointment in Zen that he really experienced was learning about the story of Ganto being killed by the bandits and letting out a shout. How could it be, first of all, that an enlightened master could be killed by bandits. And then, on top of it, he screams so loud, bloody murder, that you could hear it for 10 miles. This letdown here is knowing himself what it means to be like Ganto, being awakened, but then seeing more eye to eye that, well, there is still some work to do. He was convinced he was going to die. And he heard about this hermit, Hakuin, who was supposedly living somewhere in Shirakawa, White River, somewhere outside of Kyoto in the deep mountains. A reclusive master physician skilled in traditional Chinese healing. The description of what Hakuin taught Hakuin is very detailed. Medical science has developed in a very different way than traditional Chinese science. But from the point of view of energetic practice and naming it in specific ways, well, it is quite useful. So what did actually happen here? What did Hakuin teach Hakuin? First of all, he rebuked Hakuin for practicing in an unbalanced and self-punishing way. He told him that Zen requires both great effort and great naturalness, not brute force attack. Hakuin gave Hakuin this practice, we could call it a visualization or an energetic practice that we know as Naikan, inner contemplation, guiding energy into the Tanden, into the lower belly here to rebuild Hakuin's vitality. And using these techniques and other energetic techniques, Hakuin recovered from his Zen sickness. Now, it is like we all do. We think what works for us will work for everybody else. Or eventually we think, well, if it helps even one person beyond me, let me teach it. And that's what he did. The Zen sickness cure. And he began teaching Zen practice that demanded fierce effort, deep inquiry, but also embodiment, humility, and gentleness in a most natural way. Sometimes we fall into the belief that Hakuin, through the fierceness of his words, was somebody who was advocating and glorifying harsh austerity. Rather, when we look at his life, we find out how he taught us through his life, how to take raw determination to solve this great doubt, and how to ripen it into disciplined, integrated, and sustainable practice. Hakuin's unwavering commitment and pushing himself led him to a breakdown. Yet, he was strong enough that the same determination persisted in a way that let him receive instruction, rebuild himself, and eventually till the field for this vigorous Rinzai Zen training that we still have to this day. And that brings me to an interlude I want to talk about, and that is discipline. There are two R words starting with the letter R that come to mind here. And they are very different. One is rigid, the other one is rigorous. So in his autobiography, Wild Ivy, Hakuin talks about discipline quite a lot. And if one absorbs it, one finds that discipline is something far deeper than just rigid effort. And he repeatedly returns to the same common themes. One of them, and this is after he healed himself from the sickness that he inflicted on himself by one-sided overexertion. Discipline must be fierce, but balanced. So Hakuin criticizes even his own early years of his practice as too harsh, driven by youthful pride and the desire to be a great monk, a great Zen practitioner, performative practice. He practiced Zazen with such intensity that he drove himself into collapse. I don't know about you, but I was sitting on the Tan at Mount Bali, and these thoughts enter your mind. The thoughts come into your mind when you sit there, and you are so exhausted. And the Tan there is as high as this platform, and there's the edges right here. And you try to figure out all kinds of ways. How could I get out of here? Without losing all that faith that I have invested in having been here. I don't want to run away, but just a break would be fine. So, maybe I should just collapse and fall off the Tan. And then like they did in church when somebody collapses in the Catholic Church, when somebody collapses in the line for receiving the Eucharist, they get dragged out of line. Same thing, they would drag me out of the Zendo, and people would say, "Oh, that is true practice." So toying with these thoughts now, of course, I never gave into it. But I can tell you, it was really, really inviting to do that, to think that way. But Hakuin, as we heard under Hakuyu, learned that true discipline combines different. It's not just if one is so stubborn that one actually sits until one falls off. No, what it requires, what this hermit, which we don't even know if that person existed, but it is maybe some kind of internal teacher to himself that matured over time, as we all have in ourselves as well. But what he advocated for is steady effort. And then the Naikan practice of gathering in the Tanden. Well, what do you think that is about? Is it about ki or chi capitalism? Opening up here a deposit box, a little piggy bank of life energy, stuffing it down there. That's how it's sometimes interpreted. Yeah, you can do that. Then the piggy gets full. And you stuff more, and in the end, the piggy will break, and all the money goes where it really should go. So it's a practice of physical grounding, energetic grounding, on making sure that our energies flow completely and from our center of gravity, which is the Tanden. And what that also helps with, because if you just bottle anything up, things become unstable. It helps with emotional stability. It helps with, once you're grounded and sitting in an energetic center of gravity, emotions are like the winds that play with the leaves, but not storms that knock over trees and kill your little wolf. And what that led him to develop is also humility. There is the word of grace, you know. We have to bring ourselves to the openness that allows, in humility, to receive what this unfolding of suchness is offering to us. That is only possible if we develop humility. He realized that merely clenching your teeth and grinding and gritting is not a helpful way to practice. We all have to experience it, by all means. Grind your teeth, do it, but let's not get stuck there. So Hakuin says that practice without balance, and this is a quote from him, is like striking a flint without tinder. Lots of sparks, no fire. Sometimes we come to these sesshin and think, no sparks this time. No big this or that. It's not about the sparks. It's about kindling the fire. And once the fire is there, to attend to it so it can mature and not turn into a raging wildfire, but into something that helps us be the light, the lamp, and the fire at the same time. The second aspect that he really pointed to is that discipline is a daily embodied steadiness. After he recovered from his Zen sickness, Hakuin's view of discipline became rooted in this bodily centered awareness. That's where the Naikane came in. He really emphasized and made sure to teach his students that the spiritual effort must be carried in that center of gravity, the Tanden. Let's not get stuck on the physicality of the Tanden, but as the center of gravity of our being, not in the chest or not in the head. We all know when we think too much, our zazen looks like this. Our meals look like this. Then we do that and then our back gets stiff. So, real discipline is consistency. Please don't come to Rohatsu to enter a week of spiritual frenzy. It doesn't work. It does not work. This is not the crash course. So to sum this discipline in daily steadiness up, it's He wrote in one of his works that discipline is built in, here's the quote, the work of each day, not in dramatic breakthroughs. So we also believe that discipline must be fueled by the great doubt. For Hakuin, discipline isn't about sitting still, isn't about following rules of austerity. It is about keeping the great doubt alive. When that doubt is strong, practice becomes self-sustaining. When doubt is weak, discipline collapses into laziness, or even worse, anxiety. Great doubt. He says, when the question burns hot enough, one cannot not practice. Lastly, discipline, that's almost lastly, must mature into compassion. By the end, if you read Wild Ivy, you will find that Hakuin insists that discipline is only meaningful when it results in being of benefit to all sentient beings. He sharply warns against becoming attached to spiritual attainments and to stresses. And he wanted to embody that again, and through that embodiment, engage in non-verbal teaching, in helping and serving all sentient beings. The true fruits of discipline appear only when one, like in the 10th ox herding picture, when one can return and enter the marketplace with open hands. One of the most important realizations that he had through his own practice, and a message that he writes in many letters in this Orategama, where his letters are compiled where he wrote to practitioners. And that message is that self-violence is not Zen, and Zen is not self-violence. Discipline is not about crushing the self. It is about harmonizing the body-mind so that awakening can appear naturally. He writes that discipline is like tuning a lute. And of course, he didn't come up with that. There happens to be a sutra about that. It's called the Sona Sutta. Thus have I heard that on one occasion the Blessed One was staying near Rajagaha on Vulture Peak Mountain. And on that occasion, the Venerable Sona was staying near Rajagaha in the cool wood. Then, as Venerable Sona was meditating in seclusion, after doing walking meditation, until the skin of his soles was split and bleeding, this train of thought arose in his mind. Of the Blessed One's disciples who have aroused their persistence, I am one, but my mind is not released from the fermentations through lack of clinging. Now my family has enough wealth that it would be possible to enjoy wealth and make merit. What if I were to disavow the training, return to the lower life and enjoy the wealth and still make merit? Then the world-honored one, as soon as he perceived with his awareness the train of thought in Venerable Sona's awareness, as a strong man might stretch out his bent arm or bend his outstretched arm, disappeared from Vulture Peak Mountain and appeared in the cool wood right in front of Sona and sat down, prepared a seat. Venerable Sona, after bowing down to the Blessed One, sat to one side. As he was sitting there, the World-Honored One said to him, "Just now, as you were meditating in seclusion, didn't this train of thought appear to your mind? Of the Blessed One's disciples who have aroused their persistence, I am one, but my mind is not released from the fermentations," and so on. What if I were to disavow the training, return to the lower life and enjoy wealth and make merit? Yes, World-Honored One. The Buddha says, now what do you think, Sona? Before, when you were a house dweller, were you skilled at playing the veena? That is an Indian stringed instrument, the veena. Yes, World-Honored One. And what do you think? Oyunga, Oyunga, what do you think? We say it all the time in the Diamond Sutra. When the strings of your veena were too taut, was your veena in tune and playable? No, World-Honored One. And what do you think when the strings on your veena were too loose? Was your veena in tune and playable? No, World-Honored One. And what do you think when the strings of your veena were neither too taut nor too loose, but tuned to the right on pitch? Was your veena in tune and playable? Yes, World-Honored One. In the same way, the Buddha said, Sona, over-aroused persistence leads to restlessness. Overly slack persistence leads to laziness. Thus, you should determine the right pitch for your persistence. Attune the pitch of the 5 faculties to that, and there pick up your theme. Yes, World-Honored One. The Venerable Sona answered the Blessed One. Then, having given this exhortation, the Blessed One returned with blah, 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 outstretched arm, cool woods, magic, back to Vulture Peak Mountain. After that, Venerable Sona determined the right pitch for his persistence, attuned the pitch to the 5 faculties, and there picked up this theme. Dwelling alone, secluded, heedful, ardent, and resolute, he in no long time reached and remained in the supreme goal of the holy life for which clansmen rightly go forth from home into homelessness, knowing and realizing it for himself in the here and now. He knew birth is ended, death is ended, the holy life is fulfilled. There is nothing further for the sake of this world. Venerable Sona became another one of the awakened ones. So this is an exercise of tuning. We know what tuning is about. We don't tune the instrument with our hands. We have first to learn to listen. Not only listen with our ears, but we have to attune to the body of the instrument. And these instruments we have been given, these bodies of resonance with the strings in it, need attunement, that we attune to the center of gravity, the tanden, that we attune to the weight, the makeup, the conditionality, in order to hear that pitch and then finally work with adjusting the flexibility of the upward, the downward, the forward, the backward, the inside, the outside. To become in concord with the unfolding of this. At 30, Hakuin becomes the abbot of Shoinji, his home temple, where he remains for life. He established this vigorous and structured koan training system that still exists. He writes sermons, letters, and instructional texts. Yasen kana, idle talk on a night boat. Orategama, the embossed tea kettle essays. He develops distinctive methods for healing students' energetic imbalances and guiding lay practitioners. And his influence begins to spread widely in that time frame between 1716 and the 1740s. And the elder years, this really came to fruition in his artistic mastery. If you ever have seen a Hakuin calligraphy or a painting, they are a means of his public teaching through images, through calligraphy, from the 1740s until his death in 1769. His wisdom was embodied in daily life, accessible to everybody. He said that Zen is for butchers, merchants, farmers, everyone. His tone in the writings becomes more compassionate, humorous and relaxed, without losing any of the rigor in it. And this is not rigor mortis. This is rigor vitae, the rigor of life, of being alive, of we don't often really appreciate what an effort it is and what a miracle it is for us to walk upright, to sit upright, to keep our body in functioning order. One thing collapses, you can't breathe. So, Hakuin died in 1769 at age 83. His maturation over the entirety of his life really shows us this shift from the heroic Dharma warrior striving in the beginning to this integrated, natural and compassionate expression of Zen in all aspects of life. What does it mean to us? Well, here, the prerequisite to be here is the great doubt and the great aspiration. What sometimes seems hard to do is the great effort. The only way to stay with it is to attend to it. The first thing to be able to attend to any of those is we have to show up. We have to show up. If you just sit in this building, even in the Zendo, and you show up, I don't know what is passing by. Even if you are maybe hopefully building some kind of a pearl inside that clamshell, it's not an ideal way for us to go forward in this kind of a practice. We have to get ourselves to show up. to show up as a body in the embodiment of our movement towards the resolution of that great doubt. It's vigorous, it's not rigid. By not just following the whims of the thoughts that come up and will come up, that this is too much. This is not working for me. Are we there yet? No sparks. That is not. Yes, that goes through everybody's mind. But never forget, these are just thoughts. This is a nyoi. It's a scepter made from wood. That's the thought. That's really what it is. But by having the thought that this is a nyoi or a scepter, we make the mistake and we mix up that by the fact that this is factual to our convention of calling this a nyoi. We say this is a true thought. This thought is true. No, it's not. It's not. It's accurate in the ways how we decided to talk to each other. But the only true thing about that thought is what? That it is a thought. That's all it is. This is a sandal is as untrue as this is a nyoi. The only true thing about the two things is these are just thoughts. And once you start delving into that, your thoughts suddenly become just thoughts. And whatever they talk about, when we realize that is just a snapshot, a convention, a fear, a hope. The substance of our practice immediately follows the direction Hakuin was going. So, let's all go there together. Let's sit up straight. When the wolves come, let them come. Let the wolves tell you to sit upright. There was no jikijitsu in the graveyard. Sit up. No. We sit up ourselves. And if we just sit up to sit up, we might just turn into a gravestone and not be alive. So let us use the rest of this day of Rohatsu to really find this natural balance with this wonderful power that we are bestowed with, to have that vigor vitae, that really, really determination to fully live with discipline, showing up. For the sake of all.